Guys, welcome back to the Distinction Factory where we make our mark, and today we are going to be talking about grade 10 exponents, part 2 of it, which is basically where there's a plus and minus between your terms. So down here I've got our steps. Our first two steps stay the same as part 1 of exponents, where you have to prime base and get rid of your brackets. If you want more information on how to do that, please watch part 1 video on exponents, and everything is explained there. Our next makeshift step is to separate bases. This is not a necessary step, but I do find it helpful to do this in order to be able to go on to step 3, which is where you need to pull out a common factor. Bear in mind that you are only pulling out a common factor from when there is a plus and minus between the terms. If there's no plus and minus between terms, do not pull out a common factor. They are already in factor form. Step 4 says that you're going to cancel, and you're going to cancel almost always. It's going to be the common factors that you pulled out with each other. They usually always cancel off, and then you just simplify from there. So let's try out a question. We've got from March KZN 2024, question 1.53 over here. And our first step is to prime base and then get rid of brackets. But you'll notice that all of our bases are 2, which is already a prime number, meaning that we can skip over step 1 and 2 from here. Then we can go over to our makeshift step, which is to separate our bases. So in order to separate bases, let me just explain a little side note on how that works. Usually, when we are multiplying things with the same base, we tend to add the exponents together. So this gives us x to the power of 5. Just another little example on how to do it. If I've got 2 to the power of x times by 2 to the power of negative 2, or let's rather just make this 2 for now. We're multiplying our bases, so we're going to have to add up those exponents. So we have 2 to the power of x plus 2, like so. And usually our questions gives this to us, and we want to break it down into each of different bases. Each exponent gets its own base, basically. So for the first step, this term only has one exponent, so we don't have to break anything down there. But moving on to this guy, he has 2 separate exponents. He's got the x and he's got the negative 2. So then each of those exponents gets its own base. Coming here to our denominator, again we've got 2 exponents, so we are going to separate them into separate bases. And again, this only has one exponent there, one term as an exponent, so we can keep it the same. Our next step says that we need to pull out a common factor. So it's helpful in this way because we can identify that terms are separated by pluses and minuses. So here's our 2 terms that we've got in the numerator. And by separating the bases, we're able to identify the common factor a bit easier. So you'll see that here we've got a 2 to the power of x, and there we've also got a 2 to the power of x, meaning that that is our common factor. So I'll pull that out. And then when I pull that out from the first term, I'm left with nothing, because remember that 2 to the power of x divided by 2 to the power of x gives you 1. They basically like cancel off with each other, but we write 1 in place of it. And the reason for that is because if I say 10 divided by 10, I get the answer of 1. If I say 12 divided by 12, I get the answer of 1. So even 2 to the power of x divided by 2 to the power of x, my answer is 1. Anything divided by itself is always going to be 1. Moving on to our next term, when I pull this out as a common factor, I am left with 2 to the power of negative 2. Let's shift over to our denominators. Again, I'll separate them into terms so it's easier to identify which one comes from where. And here I'll see that I also have 2 to the power of x as a common. So when I pull it out from my first term, I'm left with 2 to the 1 minus, and then I pull it out from here, I'm left with 1. Okay, from there we can go on to our next step, which says that we need to cancel. So you'll notice again that your common factors you pull out almost always cancel off with each other. And then we go on to step 5, which is simplification. So you can just put this entire thing here into your calculator and get an answer for it. So when I put that into my calculator, I end up with 3/4 as my answer. I hope that's helped you. I do have another question on the next page. So you guys can pause the video here and try this question out by yourself, and then restart the video in order to check your answer and the steps correctly. All right, so our first step is to prime base. So in this case, the prime basing is not necessary, but just for uniformity, I'll keep it there. So the 9, when you prime base it, it becomes 3 square, and then this becomes, well, basically everything else stays the same now that I look at the bases. So this becomes 3 to the power of x plus 2 plus 5 times 3 to the power of x. All right, I went ahead and completed that, our denominator. Our next step says that we need to separate our bases. So each exponent is going to get its own base. So I'll break this up into 3 to the power of x times 3 to the power of 2. The 5 stays where it is, and the 3 to the x stays where it is. Moving on to the denominator, our first term doesn't have separate exponents, but here we do have separate exponents, so let's separate the bases. All right, our next step says that we need to pull out a common factor. So let's box them up so it's easier to identify what is common and between our terms. So we'll notice that in both of our terms, we've got a 3 to the power of x. So I will pull that out as a common factor. From the first term, I am left with 3 square and another 3 square. That can simplify to give you 3 to the power of 4, but for now, I'll just write it as 3 square times 3 square. The next one, when I pull this out as a common, I am left with 5. And moving on to our denominator, again, I'm going to box them up so it's a bit easier to identify. And you'll notice that we've got 3 to the power of x again as common between both of our terms. So when I pull it out from the first term, I'm left with nothing, so I'll write a 1. And when I pull it out from my second term, I am left with 3 to the power of 1. So our next step from here is to cancel. So again, we pulled out the common factors, and those are the things that cancel off with each other. And then we can go ahead and simplify by just putting whatever's left over into our calculator. Okay, so I went ahead and put that into my calculator, and I ended up with negative 43 as my answer. Remember that 3 square times 3 square, we add up those exponents and they give me 3 to the power of 4. And then this guy has a 1 as his exponent, so we can just write it as a 3. And then I get negative 43. I hope this video has helped you guys. Follow for my next video. Thank you.